Today on Context, costs of crime. What's the toll when one small boy is stolen from his bed? And why costs of crime are counted in more than just dollars. I'm Lorna Duick. You're watching Context, a show that looks at life beyond the headlines. The victim, 3-year-old Keenan Hebert, abducted from his bed overnight. The suspect, a known sex offender with years of criminal activity. Keenan would be returned to his family unharmed, but his parents say the justice system let them down. We'll hear from the Heberts as they count the costs of this crime. Meanwhile, the federal government moves ahead with pricey legislation that will put more criminals behind bars and keep them there longer. What does crime cost today? Let's put it in context. The federal government recently introduced comprehensive legislation it says will target crime. Joining me from Vancouver to discuss this are Kerry-Lynne, the Parliamentary Secretary to Justice Minister Rob Nicholson, and Jasbir Sandhu, Public Safety Critic for the NDP. And my first question is for Kerry-Lynne. You know, Kerry-Lynne, we've seen that the cost of crime keeps going up, but that the actual incidence of crime is being reported lower than ever. Why do this now when crime is at its lowest level since the early 70s?
Our federal Conservative government made a commitment to stand up for law-abiding Canadians and to crack down on those who would do them harm. In the same statistics that came out on the overall crime rate, it showed that, particularly in our northern communities, Newfoundland, Labrador, Nunavut, and Northwest Territories, overall crime is up. It is also up in specific areas. Child pornography is up 36%, firearms crimes, criminal harassment, sexual assault are up, and trafficking offences, drug offences are up 10%. So this is targeted legislation tailored to go after those areas where crime is on the increase. So
we're going to see a change then in northern Canada, the way policing is done there?
Well, you will see changes in accordance with the legislation that comes in, and hopefully we are giving law enforcement the tools they need in those areas where crime is increasing.
All right, Jasbir, the NDP has been a harsh critic that this is just too much money, wrongly directed. What about the human cost of crime?
I think it's very clear that the Conservatives aren't looking at the facts and stats. It's good news for Canadians that our crime rate has been going down for the last 30 years, and this is not something that Conservatives want to look at. They're reacting to things rather than being proactive in regards to having programs in place before a crime is committed. This sort of a crime agenda that the Conservatives are going forward with has been proven to be ineffective. We just have to look at our neighbors south of the border, where this was tried back in the 80s and 90s, and it hasn't worked. And in fact, the architect of that tough on crime bills back in the States, Newt Gingrich, came out and he's pointed it out that this doesn't work. We need to take a look at ways how we can reduce crime and have public safety.
Well, Kerry-Lynne, the Safe Streets and Communities Act is a sweeping act. How will it keep us safer?
Well, Canadians know that the best way to keep law-abiding people safe from criminals is to have them off the streets. And we have, for instance, in the most serious drug offenses, those involving organized crime, those where violence is threatened, there are in some cases, maximum penalties as high as life imprisonment, but there's not minimum mandatory sentences. So we're sending a very clear message. If you would exploit children in Canada, if you would sexually target them, you will do jail time. If you're involved in serious drug trafficking of the most dangerous illegal drugs and there is threats of violence, you are involved in organized crime, you will do jail time.
And do you have a financial cost on that, on the Truth in Sentencing Act is what you're talking about?
Absolutely. In the spring we tabled hundreds of documents about the cost, and then again the Minister of Justice just at the most recent Justice Committee meetings in Ottawa tabled further documentation. We estimate the cost at $78.6 million. over 5 years, as compared with the overwhelming cost in the billions of crime itself, mostly borne by victims.
All right, and most of that cost of crime is borne by the victims. We've seen those studies where over 90% of the cost of crime is borne by victims. Jasper, when you consider that human cost of crime, what's wrong with getting tough on it?
Absolutely. I think we need to make sure that the serious crimes are punished accordingly. And we also need to we need to have a balancing approach. You know, do we want to spend billions in dollars on prisons in our system, or do we want to spend that money in education, Medicare, and NDP is all for making sure that the tough criminals are punished, and the punishment has to fit the crime. If you take a look at the Justice Minister presented some papers in regards to how much it's going to cost last Thursday, but the Parliamentary Budget Officer came out on Friday and he basically said it's not worth the paper it's written on. And basically, we're going to be spending billions and billions of dollars building prison, and simply it has not worked in the United States, and we've seen an example of that. And I think this is a wrong path to go to.
We're going to go shortly to a story of a Canadian family, Kerry-Lynne, that had that most horrific thing happen of a child being abducted. The accused is someone who rehabilitation was not either working, not offered. At the heart of this, Canadians are hoping we are actually going to be rehabilitating people. How will your bill take care of that?
Well, for instance, if it is a drug offense and it is proven that the person accused has a drug addiction and they are willing to go into treatment, then the minimum sentencing will not apply. Our government and the Ministry of Justice specifically spends a lot of time, money, and energy every year dealing with crime prevention, bolstering up law enforcement agencies that work on preventing youth crime, working with youth to take them out of a criminal path. It's simply not true for the NDP to say that that is not our focus. We have an overall focus of crime prevention, and with this legislation, however, we've taken a very tailored approach on the most serious of crimes for the most vulnerable in our society, and we're committed to letting law-abiding citizens know that we're on their side.
All right. Well, both sides of the debate, we thank you both from Vancouver, and we will be back with an incredible story about one Canadian family and how they did react to the cost of crime when it moved right into their child's bedroom. We want to know what you think. Is Canada spending too much to keep criminals behind bars? Would you say yes? Would you say no? Or are you unsure? And you can send us your answers via Facebook, Twitter, email, or by phone. Is Canada spending too much to keep criminals behind bars? When Context returns, their story had a happy outcome, but this family continues to pay a price as victims of an unthinkable crime.
The big things that we noticed differently is that at night when he goes to sleep, he will be saying, he'll scream out at night in his sleep,